Well, you're ready to dive in. New series today, Heroes of the Faith. Good morning and welcome as we enter into this fall season, and also a new sermon series, a short series. There are just 3 Sundays in this series of looking at some heroes of the faith. And this morning we look at Rahab. And our scripture comes from Joshua, the 2nd chapter, the first 14 verses. And so I'm reading this morning from the Common English Bible. Joshua, Nun's son, secretly sent 2 men as spies to Shittim. He said, "Go, look over the land, especially Jericho." They set out and entered the house of a prostitute named Rahab. They bedded down there. Someone told the king of Jericho, "Men from the Israelites have come here tonight to spy on the land." So the king of Jericho sent word to Rahab, "Send out the men who came to you, the ones who came to your house, because they have come to spy on the entire land." But the woman had taken the 2 men and hidden them. Then she said, "Of course the men came to me, but I didn't know where they were from. The men left when it was time to close the gate at dark. But I don't know where the men went. Hurry, chase after them. You might catch up with them." But she had taken them up to the roof and hidden them under the flax stalks that she had laid out on the roof. The men from Jericho chased after them in the direction of the Jordan up to the fords. As soon as those chasing them went out, the gate was shut behind them. Before the spies bedded down, Rahab went up to them on the roof. She said to them, "I know that the Lord has given you the land. Terror over you has overwhelmed us. The entire population of the land has melted down in fear because of you. We have heard how the Lord dried up the water of the Reed Sea in front of you when you left Egypt. We have also heard what you did to Shittim and Og, the 2 kings of the Amorites on the other side of the Jordan. You utterly wiped them out. We heard this and our hearts turned to water. Because of you, people can no longer work up their courage. This is because the Lord your God is the God in heaven above and on earth below. Now I have been loyal to you, so pledge to me by the Lord that you in turn will deal loyally with my family. Give me a sign of good faith. Spare the lives of my father, mother, brothers, and sisters, along with everything they own. Rescue us from death." The men said to her, "We swear by our own lives to secure yours. If you don't reveal our mission, we will deal loyally and faithfully with you when the Lord gives us the land." And as the story goes on, as a sign for the to identify her, they take a crimson rope and tell her that if she would put this in her window, that the invading army will spare her and all those that are in the home with her when they come and attack. But it also says if any of your family that you wish to save aren't here in the room with you, we can't deal with that. Know that they will be killed along with everybody else when we attack. Now, this woman Rahab, we don't know anything about her past, except that it says in the scripture that she was a prostitute. There's been some interpolation, I guess is the word, that based on circumstantial evidence that she was more than just a prostitute. Her home was in the wall of the city. Now the walls that they built around the cities as a fortress were not walls in the sense that we think of them today. They were wide structures, and they were not necessarily solid all the way around. The wall might be 20 feet wide, but it wasn't 20 feet of solid rock or dirt or whatever. There were rooms built into the wall. And Rahab, her home was one of those rooms that was built into the wall. There's some speculation that she ran an inn, a place where travelers would come, and that her home was close by the gate into the city of Jericho, so that people traveling to and fro would have easy access to her facility, and that as an innkeeper, she was a hostess of sorts to the people that came and sought food and drink there. There's also speculation, because of the reference to up on the roof, that she had placed flax there to dry. Now, flax was a key ingredient in the making of linen, the fine cloth. Actually, it was not cloth so much as it was, well, I started to say it was a more solid material. I remember one of the first jobs I had was as a draftsman for Western Electric, and some of the older drawings were on a material that they called linen, and it was a woven material. You could see that it was woven, but it had been filled with something, maybe wax or something like that, to give it some body, so that you could actually draw and write on it. But linen is also known as a very fine cloth, sought-after cloth. People talk about they bring out the linen, they're bringing out their best. There was a time when the altar cloths that were used in churches had to be made out of linen, because you wanted the very best that you could have to be there on the altar. And so churches would seek out this expensive cloth to be used for that. And it was in the finer homes, it was also used as tablecloths and napkins. So she had this material, key ingredient, said that she had placed the flax there to dry. So the inference there is that she was running a business of making linen. And she also had the dye, the material, raw ingredient to make the red dye. And we hear the reference to the crimson rope that was there. So about Rahab, the only thing other than this that we absolutely know is that she was a Canaanite woman living in Jericho, and Scripture identifies her as a prostitute. The spies that Joshua had sent find their way into her facility. She recognizes them for who they are, and she hides them. She takes the initiative and hides them from the king, and not only hides them, but sends the king off on a wild goose chase for the men when they're actually still there. And then after she's done this, then she makes the plea for her family, that she wants something in return for what she has done for them. She has the foresight, and is therefore identified as a prophet, that what she knows could only have come from God, that the upcoming Israelite invasion spells doom for Jericho. It's not a question of if, it's a question of when this occurs. And she pleads for her family, and she gets the red cord to identify her. Now, some other things that we do know about Rahab after this is that she marries a man, Salmon, S-A-L-M-O-N, from the tribe of Judah. And it is thought that either Solomon was one of the two spies or he was the father of one of the two spies. He was a man of wealth and a man of importance within the tribe of Judah. Now, I did not realize this until I was doing this research, but the 10 spies that were sent earlier by Moses into to scout the land, they weren't just 10 men called up out of the ranks. They were 10 men of importance within each of the tribes that they represented. And so these 2 spies that were sent in, it's thought that they would also have been men of importance, not just run-of-the-mill soldiers that had been sent for their ability to look at it from a military standpoint. So she marries Solomon from the tribe of Judah, and one of her, they have a son, Boaz, and Boaz marries Ruth. And I did not research the next 2 generations, but she becomes the David is in there, and as therefore she is in the ancestry of Joseph, the earthly father of Jesus. So you can see God's hand at work here, that this wasn't just a happenance, that there's more to this story than just a prostitute who safeguards the spies that have been sent. So she becomes the great-great-great-grandfather of David, grandmother of David, and then, as I said, also in the lineage of Joseph, the earthly father of Jesus. It's also worth mentioning here that Joshua is a form, sometimes Jesus is interpreted as Joshua. And down in our church library, there are a series of books written by a Catholic priest. Joshua does this, Joshua does that, and it's the basis of his writing is that Jesus has returned to earth, and Joshua is Jesus in this returned form. And in somewhat, well, the books are somewhat dated now, but in the time that they were written, they were placing Jesus and people he would be confronting, situations he would be confronting, into modern day life. It's an interesting book, a series of books. I've not read them all, but I've read several of them. So that pretty well summarizes Rahab, one of our heroes of faith here. Not somebody that, as we've mentioned before, the people that God separates out for his purposes are not the people that, from a human standpoint, that you would single out and say these are the people that God's going to use. They're outcasts for the most part. And Rahab, maybe not under the Canaanite society, but certainly under the Israelite society as a prostitute, would have been an outcast. And here we see that she takes on an importance there. Now, as I said, this is a short series, just 3 weeks long. The other 2 heroes are Stephen from the book of Acts and Lydia, also from the book of Acts, that we'll be looking at in the next 2 weeks. And I thought that as we wrap up each one of these, that it would do well for us to take some time and talk about some of the heroes of our faith. So you have time to think about that, but I wanted to share with you one of the heroes of my faith. His name was T. Howard Price. I think the T stood for Thomas, but I would not swear to that. because I never heard anybody call him well, you either referred to him as Mr. Price or T. Howard. There were only a very, very few people that I ever heard call him Howard. He was the superintendent of our Sunday school, had been for eternity, as far back as anybody could remember. And when we left the church there to move to Virginia, he was still the superintendent, although he was trying to convince somebody else to take over the job at that time. But he's significant in my life for a couple of reasons. My family, we were poor and didn't know it. At least I didn't know it. I never thought of it ourselves in that way. But he was a man of some means. He owned a large dairy farm. He was on the board of directors of 2 banks that I know of, and part owner of a car dealership. So he was a man of some means. But he took an interest in my family. And when I got old enough to have a job, to do some work, he gave me my first paying job. He employed me as part of the crew that mowed the grass for our church and kept the cemetery up. And then later on, it became my job in its entirety. And I realized later that he was paying me out of his own pocket, that it was not church funds that were paying for this, that he was paying me out of his own pocket. And there were times when I was not as diligent in getting the grass cut as I should, and he would come to my house and pick me up and take me to the church, and then he would sit there in his car while I was cutting the grass to make sure that I got it done. Later on, after Jenny and I were married, we moved back to the area and lived with my grandmother for a while before moving to Virginia. And we started going to the same church that I grew up in. And Mr. Price was still there, still Sunday school superintendent. And we were taking Bill to Sunday school and then going back later for church. And I guess it was for the better part of a year. Time has kind of erased exactly how long it was, but it was a long period of time. Every Sunday during that time, Mr. Price would confront me at some point while we were there for church. And he had the same question. He might phrase it differently, but the question was the same every Sunday. When are you going to start coming to Sunday school and be the example that your son needs? I like to say that I saw the light and eventually started going to Sunday school, but the reality is he wore me down. I just didn't know how to say no to him anymore. And I started going to Sunday school. We only had one adult class. I was the youngest person in that class. And very soon after I started going to the class, they decided that I should teach the class, which I did not want to do, but that began a journey for me. Actually began a love affair of Scripture, because in teaching that class, I had to start reading Scripture and start learning about Scripture in ways that I had never done before. And so Mr. Price is one of the heroes of my faith. So as we get to the next 2 weeks, if you think about it, and I'll give you some time to share your heroes and those people and what they've done for you in your faith journey. So we'll see what Pastor Don has to say here in a few moments, and hope that you'll be joining us in this Heroes of Faith series. May God's blessings be upon you.